This episode of Sleepy is proudly sponsored by OneSkin. You've definitely heard me talk about OneSkin's OS01 face moisturizer. It's really great. I've been using it for a while now, and especially in this hot summer, my skin feels smoother and more hydrated and less reactive to the sun and heat. OneSkin, it's just really easy. You wash your face, you pat it dry, you apply, and that's it. It smells great, it feels great, and it's backed by real science. OneSkin's OS01 peptide is the first ingredient proven to target the damaged aging cells that lead to fine lines and thinning skin. I have really come to love it. And now OneSkin has expanded their line with a brand new collection of mineral SPF products for your face, body, and lips. The SPF line is designed not just to protect your skin from UV damage, but also support long-term skin health. It uses non-nano zinc oxide, vitamin C, antioxidants, and that same OS01 peptide to nourish your skin and help repair past sun damage while you're out in the world. OneSkin is the world's first skin longevity company. By focusing on the cellular aspects of aging, OneSkin keeps your skin looking and acting younger for longer. For a limited time, you can try OneSkin with 15% off using code SLEEPY at oneskin.co. That's 15% off at oneskin.co with code SLEEPY. And after you purchase, they'll ask where you heard about them. Please give Sleepy a shout out, support the show, and tell them I sent you. I'll put a link for this in the show notes. Thanks. This episode of Sleepy is proudly sponsored by Shopify. When I first started this show and started podcasting in general, I learned a lot of stuff the hard way. Writing, editing, recording, producing, marketing, social media. It was a lot to start doing this, and while I love knowing how to do all those things now, I definitely would have loved to know about tools that would have made my life simpler, like I do today. Tools that make my business and my life just run smoother. Well, Shopify is definitely one of those tools. It is the business behind the business. It's the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, from household names like Mattel to businesses just getting started. There's hundreds of ready-to-use templates to build a beautiful online store that matches your brand. Shopify has tons of helpful AI tools to help you build out and fill your site in no time. It's also really easy to get the word out with easily made email and social media campaigns. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. So, if you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into reality with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/Otis. Go to shopify.com/OTIS. Shopify.com/Otis. I'll put a link for this in the show notes. Thanks. Hey, my name's Otis Gray, and you're listening to Sleepy. A podcast where I read old books to help you get to sleep. Tonight, we're reading the first part of a beautiful novel written by one of my favorite authors, Edith Nesbit. This is a really delightful bedtime reading. And before we get to the story, I just want to profoundly thank all of our brand new patrons on patreon.com, which is a site where you can go and pledge a couple bucks for an ad-free version of the show. So, this week's amazing new patrons: Lori K, Jeff, Maddie, Heidi McMath, Mary Burgee, Meryl, Kathy Carlin, Kay Carruthers, Karina Vader, and Jill Davis Katz. Thank you all so much for being a part of making this show. It really, really means a lot. And for anyone who doesn't know, the names that I just read are brand new supporters of Sleepy on patreon.com, which just allows you to support creators who make the stuff that you like directly in exchange for cool perks. Like I said, at $2 a month, you get access to the ad-free version of Sleepy. At $5, you get access to our poetry feed. But even if you donate $1, that means so much to me, and no matter how much you donate, I'll read your name in the opening credits of the next show after you do. So again, if you would like to be a part of making the show, like the names that I just read, then you can go to patreon.com/sleepyradio. Thank you. And as always, the music you're hearing is by my good friend James Lepkowski, and the cover art for Sleepy is by Gracie Kanan. Tonight, I have a story by an author I love, which, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you know that I really do love Edith Nesbit. There's just something really special and timeless about her writing, especially when you read her kids' characters, and she's just so in touch with that childlike wonder that I think really makes for a good story, and also really makes for a good bedtime story, because it makes you feel like you're a kid being read to. Well, tonight's novel is no different. This is called The House of Arden, and it is a wonderfully adventurous little book. The first chapter of it is a long, lovely tale of two siblings basically going on an adventure, looking for treasure, finding out mysteries about themselves and who they are. It's really quite lovely. So I hope you can fall super soundly asleep to this reading of The House of Arden by Edith Nesbit. And now is the time for you to fluff up your pillow just how you like it. Feel yourself melt into your bed. Get real comfortable. Close your eyes and let me read to you. Chapter 1. Arden's Lord. It had been a great house once, with farms and fields, money and jewels, with tenants and squires and men-at-arms. The head of the house had ridden out 3 days' journey to meet King Henry at the boundary of his estate, and the king had ridden back with him to lie in the tall state bed in the castle guest chamber. The heir of the house had led his following against Cromwell. Younger sons of the house had fought in foreign lands to the honor of England and the gilding and regilding with the perishable gold of glory of the old Arden name. There had been Ardens in Saxon times, but there were Ardens still, a few and impoverished. The lands were gone, and the squires and men-at-arms. The castle itself was roofless, and its unglazed windows stared blankly across the fields of strangers that stretched light up to the foot of its gray, weather-worn walls. And of the male Ardens, there were now known two only, an old man and a child. The old man was Lord Arden, the head of the house, and he lived lonely in a little house built of the fallen stones that time and Cromwell's round shot had cast from the castle walls. The child was Edith Arden, and he lived in a house in a clean, windswept town on a cliff. It was a bright-faced house, with bow windows and a green balcony that looked out over the sparkling sea. It had 3 neat white steps and a brass knocker, pale and smooth with constant rubbing. It was a pretty house, and it would have been a pleasant house, but for one thing, the lodgers. For I cannot conceal from you any longer that Edred Arden lived with his aunt, and that his aunt let lodgings. Letting lodgings is one of the most unpleasant of all possible ways of earning your living. and I advise you to try every other honest way of earning your living before you take to that. Because people who go to the seaside and take lodging seem, somehow, much harder to please than people who go to hotels. They want ever so much more waiting on. They want so many meals, and at such odd times. They ring the bell almost all day long. They bring in sand from the shore in every fold of their clothes, and it shakes out of them onto the carpets and the sofa cushions and everything in the house. They hang long streamers of wet seaweed against the pretty roses of the new wallpapers, and their wash-hand basins are always full of sea anemones and shells. Also, they are noisy. Their boots seem to be always on the stairs, no matter how bad a headache you may have. And when you give them their bill, they always think it is too much, no matter how little it may be. So do not let lodgings, if you can help it. Miss Arden could not help it. It happened like this. Edith and his sister were at school. Did I tell you that he had a sister? Well, he had, and her name was Elfrida. Miss Arden lived near the school, so that she could see the children often. She was getting her clothes ready for her wedding, and the gentleman who was going to marry her was coming home from South America, where he had made a fortune. The children's father was coming home from South America too, with the fortune that he had made, for he and Miss Arden's sweetheart were partners. The children and their aunt talked whenever they met of the glorious time that was coming, and how when Father and Uncle Jim, they called him Uncle Jim already, came home, they were all going to live in the country and be happy ever after. And then the news came that Father and Uncle Jim had been captured by brigands, and all the money was lost too, and there was nothing left but the house on the cliff. So Miss Arden took the children from the expensive school in London, and they all went to live in the cliff house. And as there was no money to live on, and no other way of making money to live on except letting lodgings, Miss Arden let them, like the brave lady she was, and did it well. And then came the news that Father and Uncle Jim were dead, and for a time the light of life went out in Cliff House. This was 2 years ago, but the children had never got used to the lodgers. They hated them. At first they tried to be friendly with the lodgers' children, but they soon found that the lodgers' children considered Edith and Elfrida very much beneath them and looked down on them accordingly. And very often the lodgers' children were the sort of children on whom anybody might have looked down, if it were right and kind to look down on anyone. And when Master Reginald Potts of Peckham puts his tongue out at you on the parade and says right before everybody, "Lodgings, yeah," it is hard to feel quite the same to him as you did before. When there were lodgers, and there nearly always were, for the house was comfortable, and people who had been once came again, the children and their aunt had to live in the very top and the very bottom of the house, in the attics and the basement, in fact. When there were no lodgers, they used all rooms in turn and kept them aired. But the children liked the big basement parlor room best, because there, all the furniture had belonged to dead and gone Ardens, and all the pictures on the walls were of Ardens dead and gone. The rooms that lodgers had were furnished with a new sort of furniture that had no stories belonging to it, such as belonged to the old polished oak tables and bureau that were in the basement parlor. Edith and Elfrida went to school every day and learned reading, writing, arithmetic, geography, history, spelling, and useful knowledge, all of which they hated quite impartially, which means they hated the whole lot, one thing as much as the other. The only part of lessons they liked was the homework, when, if Aunt Edith had time to help them, Geography became like adventures, history like storybooks, and even arithmetic suddenly seemed to mean something. I wish you could teach us always, said Edith, very inky, and interested for the first time in the exports of China. It does seem so silly, trying to learn things that are only words in books. I wish I could, said Aunt Edith, but I can't do 29,017 things all at once. And a bell jangled. That's the 7th time since tea. She got up and went into the kitchen. There's the bell again. My poor Eliza. Never mind. Answer the bell, but don't answer them, whatever they say. It doesn't do a bit of good, and it sometimes prevents their giving you half-crowns when they leave. I do love it when they go, said Elfrida. Yes, said her aunt. A cab, top-heavy with luggage. The horse's nose turned stationward. Its heavenly sight, when the bill is paid, and... But then, I'm just as glad to see the luggage coming. Chickens. When my ship comes home, we'll go and live in a desert island, where there aren't any cabs, and we don't have any lodgers in our cave. When I grow up, said Edith, I shall go across the sea and look for your ship and bring it home. I shall take a steam tug and steer it myself. Then I shall be captain, said Elfrida. No, I shall be captain. You can't if you steer. Yes, I can. No, you can't. Yes, I can. Well, do then, said Elfrida. And while you're doing it, I know you can. I shall dig in the garden and find a gold mine, and Aunt Edith will be rolling in money when you come back, and she won't want your silly old chip. Spelling next, said Aunt Edith. How do you spell disagreeable? Which of us? Asked Edith acutely. Both, said Aunt Edith, trying to look very severe. When you are a child, you always dream of your ship coming home, of having 100 pounds, or 1,000, or 1,000,000 pounds to spend as you like. My favorite dream, I remember, was 1,000 pounds, and an express understanding that I was not to spend it on anything useful. And when you have dreamed of your 1,000,000 pounds, or your 1,000, or your 100, you spend happy hour on hour in deciding what presents you will buy for each of the people you are fond of, and in picturing their surprise and delight at your beautiful presents and your wonderful generosity. I think very few of us spend our dream fortunes entirely on ourselves. Of course, we buy ourselves a motor bicycle straight away, and footballs and bats, and dolls with real hair, and real china tea sets, and large boxes of mixed chocolates, and Treasure Island, and all the books that Mrs. Ewing ever wrote. But when we have done that, we begin to buy things for other people. It is a beautiful dream, but too often, by the time it comes true, up to 100 pounds or 1,000, we forget what we used to mean to do with our money, and spend it all in stocks and shares, and eligible building sites, and fat cigars and fur coats. If I were young again, I would sit down and write a list of all the kind things I meant to do when my ship came home. And if my ship ever did come home, I would read that list. But the parlor bell's ringing for the 8th time, and the front door bell is ringing too, and the first floor is ringing also, and so is the second floor. And Eliza is trying to answer 4 bells at once, always a most difficult thing to do. The front door bell was rung by the postman. He brought 3 letters. The first was a bill for mending the lid of the cistern, on which Edith had recently lighted a fire, fortified by an impression that wood could not burn if there were water on the other side. A totally false impression, as the charred cistern lid proved. The second was an inquiry whether Miss Arden would take a clergyman in at half the usual price, because he had a very large family, which had all just had measles. And the third was the letter, which is really the seed and beginning and backbone and rhyme and reason of this story. Edred had got the letters from the postman, and he stood and waited while Aunt Edith read them. He collected postmarks, and had not been able to make out by the thick half-light of the hall gas whether any of these were valuable. The third letter had a very odd effect on Aunt Edith. She read it once and rubbed her hand across her eyes. Then she got up and stood under the chandelier, which wanted new burners badly, and so burned with a very unlighting light, and read it again. Then she read it a third time, and then she said, "Oh." "What is it, Auntie?" Elfrida asked anxiously. "Is it the taxes?" It had been the taxes once, and Elfrida had never forgotten. "If you don't understand what this means, ask your poorest relations, who are also likely to be your nicest. And if they don't know, ask the washerwoman." "No, it's not the taxes, darling," said Aunt Edith. "On the contrary. I don't know what the contrary, or opposite, of taxes is, any more than children did, but I am sure it is something quite nice, and so were they." "Oh, Auntie, I am so glad," they both said, and said it several times before they asked again. "What is it?" I'm not quite sure, but I think it's a ship come home. Oh, just a quite tiny little bit of a ship, a toy boat, hardly more than that. But I must go up to London tomorrow the first thing, and see if it really is a ship, and if so, what sort of ship it is. Mrs. Blake shall come in, and you'll be as good as gold, children, won't you?" "Yes, oh yes," said the two. "And not make booby traps for the butcher, or go on the roof in your nightgowns, or play cowboys in the dustbin, or make apple pie beds for the lodgers?" Aunt Edith asked, hastily mentioning a few of the little amusements which had lately enlivened the spare time of her nephew and niece. "No, we really won't," said Edred, "and we'll truly not try to think of anything new and amusing," he added, with real self-sacrifice. "I must go by the 8:30 train. I wish I could think of some way of amusing you," she ended, for she was too kind to say, of keeping you out of mischief for the day, which was what she really thought. "I'll bring you something jolly for your birthday, Edred. Wouldn't you like to spend the day with nice Mrs. Hammond?" "Oh no," said Edred, she added, on the inspiration of the moment. "Why mayn't we have a picnic? Just Elf and me, on the Downs, to keep my birthday. It doesn't matter it being the day before, does it? You said we were too little last summer, and we should this, and now it is this, and I've grown 2 inches, and Elf's grown 3, so we're 5 inches taller than when you said we weren't big enough." "Now you see how useful arithmetic is," said the aunt. "Very well, you shall. Only wear your old clothes, and always keep in sight of the road. Yes, you can have a whole holiday. And now, to bed. Oh, there's that bell again. Poor dear Eliza." A Clapham cub, belonging to one of the lodgers, happened to be going up to bed just as Edred and Elfrida came through the baize door that shut off the basement from the rest of the house. He put his tongue out through the banisters at the children of the house and said, "Hey, little ones." The cub thought he could get upstairs before the two got round the end of the banisters, but he had not counted on the long arm of Elfrida, whose hand shot through the banisters and caught the cub's leg and held on to it till Edred had time to get around. The two boys struggled up the stairs together and then rolled together from top to bottom, where they were picked up and disentangled by their relations. Except for this little incident, going to bed was uneventful. Next morning, Aunt Edith went by the 8:30 train. The children's school satchels were filled, not with books, but with buns. Instead of exercise books, there were sandwiches, and in the place of inky pencil boxes were 2 magnificent boxes of peppermint creams, which had cost a whole shilling each, and had been recklessly bought by Aunt Edith in the agitation of the parting hour when they saw her off at the station. They went slowly up the red brick paved sidewalk that always looked as though it had been washed, and when they got to the top of the hill, they stopped and looked at each other. "It can't be wrong," said Edith. "She never told us not to," said Elfrida. "I've noticed," said Edith, "that when grown-up people say they'll see about anything you want, it never happens." "I've noticed that too," said Elfrida. "Auntie always said she'd see about taking us there." "Yes, she did." "We won't be mean and sneaky about it," Edith insisted, though no one had suggested that he would be mean and sneaky. "We'll tell Auntie directly she gets back." "Of course," said Elfrida, rather relieved, for she had not felt at all sure that Edith meant to do this. "After all," said Edith, "it's our castle. We ought to go and see the cradle of our race. That's what it calls it in Cliffgate and environs. I say, let's call it a pilgrimage. The satchels would do for packs, and we can get halfpenny walking sticks with that penny of yours. We can put peas in our shoes if you like," he added generously. "We should have to go back for them, and I don't expect the split kind count, anyhow. And perhaps they'd hurt," said Elfrida doubtfully. "And I want my penny for—" She stopped, warned by her brother's frown. "All right then," she ended. "You can have it. Only give me half next time you get a penny. That's only fair." "I'm not usually unfair," said Edith coldly. "Don't let's be pilgrims." "But I should like to," said Elfrida. Edith was obstinate. "No," he said. "We'll just walk." So they just walked rather dismally. The town was getting thinner, like the tract of stocking that surrounds a hole. The houses were farther apart and had large gardens. In one of them a maid was singing to herself as she shook out the mats, a thing which, somehow, maids don't do much in towns. "Good luck," says I to my sweetheart, "for I will love you true, and all the while we've got to part, my luck shall go with you." "That's lucky for us," said Elfrida amiably. "We're not her silly sweetheart," said Edith. "No, but we heard her sing it, and he wasn't here, so we couldn't. There's a signpost. I wonder how far we've gone. I'm getting awfully tired." "You'd better have been pilgrims," said Edith. "They never get tired, however many peas they have in their shoes." "I will now," said Elfrida. "You can't," said Edith. "It's too late. We're miles and miles from the stick shop." "Very well, I shan't go on," said Elfrida. "You got out of bed on the wrong side this morning. I've tried to soft answer you as hard as I ever could all morning, and I'm not going to try any more. So there." "Don't then," said Edith bitterly. "Go along home if you like. You're only a girl." "I'd rather be only a girl than what you are," said she. "And what's that, I should like to know?" Elfrida stopped and shut her eyes tight. Don't, she said. "I won't be cross. I won't be cross. I won't be cross. Pax, drop it. Don't. Let's." "Don't let's what?" "Quarrel about nothing," said Elfrida, opening her eyes and walking on very fast. "We're always doing it. Auntie says it's a habit. If boys are so much splendider than girls, they ought to be able to stop when they like." "Suppose they don't like," said he. kicking his boots in the thick white dust. "Well," said she, "I'll say I'm sorry first. Will that do?" "I was just going to say it first myself," said Edith, in aggrieved tones. "Come on," he added more generously. "Here's the signpost. Let's see what it says." It said, quite plainly and without any nonsense about it, that they had come 1 3/4 miles, adding, most unkindly, that it was 8 miles to Arden Castle. But, it said, it was 1/4 mile to Ardenhurst Station. "Let's go by train," said Edith grandly. "No money," said Elfrida, very forlornly indeed. "Ah," said Edith, "now you'll see. I'm not meat about money. I brought my new florin." "Oh, Edith," said the girl, stricken with remorse, "you are noble." "Pooh," said the boy, and his ears grew red with mingled triumph and modesty. "That's nothing. Come on." So it was from the train that the pilgrims got their first sight of Arden Castle. It stands up boldly on the cliff, where it was set to keep off foreign foes and guard the country round about it. But of all its old splendor, there is now nothing but the great walls and the grasses and wild flowers grow on, and round towers whose floors and ceilings have fallen away, and roofless chambers where owls build, and brambles and green ferns grow strong and thick. The children walked to the castle along the cliff path, where the skylarks were singing like mad up in the pale sky, and the bean fields, where the bees were busy, gave out the sweetest scent in the world, a scent that got itself mixed with the scent of the brown seaweed that rises and falls in the wash of the tide on the rocks at the cliff foot. "Let's have dinner here," said Elfrida, when they reached the top of a little mound, from which they could look down on the castle. So they had it. 2 bites of sandwich and 1 peppermint cream. That was the rule. And all the time they were munching, they looked down on the castle and loved it more and more. "Don't you wish it was real, and we lived on it?" Elfrida asked, when they'd eaten as much as they wanted. Not of peppermint creams, of course, but they'd finished them. "It is real, what there is of it." "Yes, but I mean, if it was a house with chimneys and fireplaces and doors with bolts and glass in the windows." "I wonder if we could get in," said Edith. "We might climb over," said Elfrida, looking hopefully at the enormous walls, 60 feet high, in which no gate or gap showed. "There's an old man going across that field. No, not that one. The very green field. Let's ask him." So they left their satchels lying on the short turf. That was half wild thyme, and went down. But they were not quite quick enough. Before they could get to him, the old man had come through the field of young corn, clambered over a stile, and vanished between the high hedges of a deep-sunk plain. So over the stile and down into the lane went the children, and caught up with the old man just as he had clicked his garden gate behind him, and had turned to go up the bricked path between beds of woodruff and anemones and narcissus and tulips of all colors. His back was towards them. Now it is very difficult to address a back politely, so you'll not be surprised to learn that Edith said, "Hi," and Elfrida said, "Hello, I say." The old man turned and saw at his gate 2 small figures dressed in what is known as sailor costume. They saw a very old wrinkled face with snowy hair and mutton chop whiskers of a silvery whiteness. There were very bright, twinkling blue eyes in a sun-browned face, and on the clean-shaven mouth, a kind of, if tight, smile. "Well," said he, "what do you want?" "We want to know," said Elfrida. "About the castle," said Edith. "Can we get in and look at it?" I've got the keys, said the old man, and put his hand in at his door and reached them from a nail. I suppose no one lives there, said Elfrida. Not now, said the old man, coming back along the garden path. Lord Arden, he died a fortnight ago come Tuesday, and the place is shut up till the new lord's found. I wish I was the new lord, said Edred, as they followed the old man along the lane. And how old might you be? The old man asked. I'm 10 nearly. It's my birthday tomorrow, said Edred. How old are you? Getting on for 80. I've seen a deal in my time. If you was the young lord, you'd have a chance none of the rest of them ever had, you being the age you are. What sort of chance? Why, said the old man, don't you know the saying? I thought everyone knowed it, hereabouts. What saying? I ain't got the wind for saying and walking, too, said the old man, and stopped. Leastways, not poetry. He drew a deep breath and said, When Arden's lord still lacketh 10, and may not see his 9 again, let Arden stand as Arden may, on Arden knoll at death of day. If he have skill to say the spell, he shall find the treasure, and all will be well. I say, said both the children. And where's Arden Knoll? Edred asked. Up yonder. He pointed to the mound where they had lunch. Elfrida inquired, What treasure? But that question was not answered. Then, If I'm to talk, I must set me down, said the old man. Shall we set me down here, or set down inside the castle? Two curiosities struggled, and the stronger won. In the castle, said the children. So it was in the castle, on a pillar, fallen from one of the chapel arches, that the old man sat down and waited. When the children had run up and down the grassy enclosure, peeped into the ruined chambers, picked their way along the ruined colonnade, and climbed the steps of the only tower that they could find with steps to climb, then they came and sat beside the old man on the grass that was white with daisies, and said, Now then. Well then, said the old man, you see the Ardens was always great gentry. I've heard say that there's always been Ardens here since before William the Conqueror, whoever he was. 1066, said Edred to himself. And they had their ups and downs, like other folks, great and small. And once, when there was a war or trouble of some sort abroad, there was a lot of money, and jewelry, and silver plate hidden away. That's what it means by treasure. And the men who hid it got killed. Ah, them was unsafe times to live in, I tell you. And nobody never knew where the treasure was hid. Did they ever find it? Ain't I telling you? And a wise woman that lived in them old ancient times. They went to her to ask her what to do to find the treasure, and she had a fit directly, what you call a historical fit nowadays. She never said nothing worth hearing without she was in a fit, and she made up the saying all in poetry whilst she was in her fit, and that was all they could get out of her, and she never would say what the spell was. Only when she was dying, Lady Arden, that was them, was very took up with nursing of her, and before she breathed her latest, she told Lady Arden the spell. He stopped for lack of breath. And what is the spell? Said the children, much more breathless than he. Nobody knows, said he. But where is it? Nobody knows. But I've heard say it's in a book in the library in the house yonder. But it ain't no good, because there's never been a Lord Arden come to his title without he's left his 10 years far behind him. Edred had a queerer feeling in his head than you can imagine. His hands got hot and dry, and then cold and damp. I suppose, he said, you've got to be Lord Arden? It wouldn't do if you were just plain John or James or Edith Arden, because my name's Arden, and I would like to have a try." The old man stopped, caught Edred by the arm, pulled him up, and stood him between his knees. "Let's have a look at you, Sonny," he said, and had a look. "Aye," he said, "you're an Arden for sure. To think of me not seeing that. I might have seen your long nose and chin that sticks out like a spur. I ought to have known it anywhere. But my eyes ain't what they was. If you was Lord Arden, what's your father's name? His christened name, I mean." "Edred, the same as mine. But father's dead," said Edred gravely. "Your grandfather's name? It wasn't George, was it? George William?" "Yes, it was," said Edred. "How did you know?" The old man let go Edred's arms and stood up. Then he touched his forehead and said, "I've worked on the land here, man and boy, and I'm proud I've lived to see another Lord Arden take the place of him as is gone. Look alive, boy. Don't gape like that," he added sharply. "You're Lord Arden right enough." I can't be," gasped Edred. "Auntie said Lord Arden was a relation of ours, a sort of great uncle, cousin." "That's it, missy," the old man nodded. "Lord Arden, christened name James, was first cousin of Mr. George, as was your grandfather. His son was Mr. Edred, as is your father. The late Lord, not having any sons, nor daughters, neither for the matter of that. The title comes to your branch of the family. I've heard Snigsworthy, the lawyer's apprentice from Lewis, tell it over 50 times this last 3 weeks. You're Lord Arden, I tell you." "If I am," said Edred, "I shall say the spell and find the treasure." "You'll have to be quick about it," said Elfrida. "You'll be over 10 the day after tomorrow." "So I shall," said Edred. "When you're Lord Arden," said the old man very seriously, "I mean, when you grow up to enjoy the title, as please God you may, you remember the poor and needy, young master. That's what you do." "If I find the treasure, I will," said Edred. "You do it whether or no," said the old man. "I must be getting along home. You'd like to play about a bit, eh? Well, bring me the keys when you've done. I can trust you not hurt your own place. That's been in the family all these hundreds of years." "I should think you could," said Edred proudly. "Goodbye, and thank you." "Goodbye, my lord," said the old man, and went. "I say," said Edred, with a big bunch of keys in his hand, "if I am Lord Arden." You are," said Elfrida. "I am perfectly certain you are. And I suppose I'm Lady Arden. How perfectly ripping. We can shut up those lodging children now, anyhow. What's up?" Edred was frowning and pulling the velvet covering of moss off the big stone on which he had absently sat down. "Do you think it's vulgarish," he said slowly, "to go into your own house without leave?" "Not if it is your own house, of course not," said Elfrida. "But suppose it isn't. They might put you in prison for it." "You could tell the policeman you thought it was yours. I say, Edred, let's." "It's not vulgar curiosity, like Aunt says. It's the spell I want," said the boy. "As if I didn't know that," said the girl contemptuously. "But where's the house?" She might well ask, for there was no house to be seen, only the great gray walls of the castle, with their fine fringe of flowers and grass showing feathery against the pale blue of the June sky. Here and there, though, there were gray wooden doors set in the gray of the stone. "It must be one of those," Edred said. "We'll try all the keys and all the doors till we find it." So they tried all the keys and all the doors. One door led to a loft where apples were stored. Another to a cellar where brooms and spades and picks leaned against the damp wall. and there were baskets and piles of sacks. A third opened into a tower that seemed to be used as a pigeon cote. It was the very last door they had tried that led into the long garden between two high walls, where already the weeds had grown high among the forget-me-nots and pansies. And at the end of this garden was a narrow house with a red roof, wedged tightly in between two high gray walls that belonged to the castle. All the blinds were down. The garden was chill and quiet. It smelt of damp earth and dead leaves. "Oh, Edred, do you think we ought?" Elfrida said, shivering. "Yes, I do," said Edred. "And you're not being good, whatever you may think. You're only being frightened." Elfrida naturally replied, "I'm not. Come on." But it was very slowly, and with a feeling of being on tiptoe and holding their breaths, that they went up to those blinded windows that looked like sightless eyes. The front door was locked, and none of the keys would fit it. "I don't care," said Edred. "If I am Lord Arden, I've got a right to get in, and if I'm not, I don't care about anything, so here goes." Elfrida almost screamed, half with horror and half with admiration of his daring, when he climbed up to a little window by means of an elder tree that grew close to it, tried to open the window, and when he found it fast, deliberately pushed his elbow through the glass. "Thus," he said rather unsteadily, "the heir of Arden Castle re-enters his estates." He got the window open and disappeared through it. Elfrida stood clasping and unclasping her hands, and in her mind, trying to get rid of the idea of a very large and sudden policeman appearing in the garden door and saying, in that deep voice so much admired in our village constables, "Where is your brother?" No policeman came, fortunately, and presently a blind went up, a French window opened, and there was Edred, beckoning her with the air of a conspirator. It needed an effort to obey his signal, but she did it. He closed the French window, drew down the blind again, and— "Oh, don't let's," said Elfrida. "Nonsense," said Edred. "There's nothing to be frightened of. It's just like our rooms at home." It was. They went all over the house, and it certainly was. Some of the upper rooms were very bare, but all the furniture was of the same kind as Aunt Edith's, and there were the same kinds of pictures. Only the library was different. It was a very large room, and there were no pictures at all. Nothing but books and books and books bound in yellowy leather. Books from ceiling to floor, shelves of books between the windows and over the mantelpiece, hundreds and thousands of books. Even Edred's spirits sank. "It's no go. It would take us years to look in them all," he said. "We may as well look at some of them," said Elfrida, always less daring, but more persevering than her brother. She sat down on the worn carpet and began to read the names on the backs of the books nearest to her. "Burton's Atomy of Melon something," she read, and "Lock on Understanding," and many other dull and wearying titles. But none of these books seemed at all likely to contain a spell for finding treasure. Burgess on the precious metals beguiled her for a moment, but she saw at once that there was no room in its closely printed, brown-spotted pages for anything so interesting as a spell. Time passed by. The sunlight that came through the blinds had quite changed its place on the carpet, and still Elfrida persevered. Edred grew more and more restless. "It's no use," he kept saying, and "let's chuck it," and "I expect that old chap was just kidding us. I don't feel a bit like I did about it," and let's get along home." But Elfrida plodded along. though her head and back both ached. I wish I could say that her perseverance was rewarded, but it wasn't, and one must keep to facts. As it happened, it was Edred who, aimlessly running his finger along the edge of the bookshelf just for the pleasure of looking at the soft, mouse-colored dust that clung to his finger at the end of each shelf, suddenly cried out, "What about this?" and pulled out a great white book that had on its cover a shield printed in gold and squares and little spots on it, and a gold pig standing on the top of the shield, and on the back, the history of the Ardens of Arden. In an instant, it was open on the floor between them, and they were turning pages with quick, anxious hands. But alas, it was as empty of spells as dull old Burgess himself. It was only when Edred shut it with a bang and the remark that he had jolly well enough of it that a paper fluttered out and swept away like a pigeon, settling on the fireless hearth. And it was the spell. There was no doubt of that. Written in faint ink on a square yellowed sheet of letter paper that had been folded once, and opened and folded again, so often that the fold was worn thin and hardly held its two parts together. The writing was fine and pointed and ladylike. At the top was written, "The spell Aunt Anne told me, December 4th, 1793. And then came the spell. Here, O badge of Arden's house, the spell my little age allows. Arden speaks it without fear. Badge of Arden's house, draw near. Make me brave and kind and wise, and show me where the treasure lies. To be said, the paper went on, at sunsetting, by a Lord Arden between the completion of his 9th and 10th years. But it is all folly, and not to be believed. This is it, right enough, said Edred. Come on, let's get out of this. They turned to go, and as they did so, something moved in the corner of the library. Something little. They could not see its shape. Neither drew free breath again till they were out of the house, and out of the garden, and out of the castle, and on the wide, thymy downs, with the blue sky above, where the skylark sang, and there was sweet, fresh scent of the seaweed in the bean fields. Oh, said Elfrida, then, I'm so glad it's not at midnight. You've got to say the spell. You'd be too frightened. I shouldn't, said Edred, very pale, and walking quickly away from the castle. I should say it just the same if it was midnight. And he very nearly believed what he had said. Elfrida, it was, who picked up the paper that Edred had dropped. That thing moved in the corner. She still held it fast. I expect it was only a rat or something, said Edred, his heart beating 19 to a dozen, as they say in Kent and elsewhere. Oh yes, said Elfrida, whose lips were trembling a little. I'm sure it was only a rat or something. When they got to the top of Arden Knoll, there was no sign of sunset. There was time, therefore, to pull oneself together, to listen to the skylarks, to smell the bean flowers, and to wonder how one could have been such a duffer as to be scared by a rat or something. Although there were some bits of sandwich and crumbled cake, despised at dinner time, but now, somehow, tasting quite different. These helped to pass the time till the sun almost seemed to rest on a brown shoulder of the downs that looked as though it were shrugging itself up to meet the round red ball that the evening mists had made out of the sun. The children had not spoken for several minutes. Their 4 eyes were fixed on the sun, and as the edge of it seemed to flatten itself against the hill shoulder, Elfrida whispered, "Now," and gave her brother the paper. They had read the spell so often, as they sat there in the waning light, that both knew it by heart, so there was no need for Edith to read it. And that was lucky, for in that thick pink light, the faint ink hardly showed at all on the yellowy paper. Edith stood up. "Now," said Elfrida again. "Say it now." And Edith said, quite out loud, and in a pleasant sort of sing-song, such as he was accustomed to use at school when reciting the stirring ballads of the late Lord Macaulay, or the moving tale of the boy on the burning deck. "Here, O badge of Arden's house, the spell my little age allows. Arden speaks it without fear. Badge of Arden's house, draw near. Make me brave and kind and wise, and show me where the treasure lies." He said it slowly and carefully, his sister eagerly listening, ready to correct him if he said a wrong word. But he did not. "Where the treasure lies," he ended, and the great silence of the downs seemed to rush in like a wave to fill the space which his voice had filled. And nothing else happened at all. A flush of pink from the sun setting spread over the downs. The grass stems showed up thin and distinct. The skylarks had ceased to sing. But the scent of the bean flowers and the seaweed was stronger than ever. And nothing happened till Edith cried out, "What's that?" For close to his foot something moved, not quickly or suddenly as so to startle, but very gently, very quietly, very unmistakably. Something that glittered goldenly in the pink diffused light of the sun setting. "Why," said Elfrida, stooping. "Why, it's..." Thank you for listening to Sleepy. Good night.